welcome to what may or may not, because it's possible this won't ever see the light of day. It's too early to say yet. But what we aspire to have as the first of the Matt Difanis team podcast featuring Joseph Gray and Miss Turat,
We can set
a.k.a.
our own
Missy
name.
Ganiyu. All right, we can say our own names. Hi,
Yeah. So
everybody.
first,
I'm
yeah.
Matt. I'm Matt Difanis, broker owner of Remax Realty Associates and team lead of the Matt Difanis team. And today I am joined by
I'm Matt Difanis. No, wait. No, I'm I'm Joseph Gray with the Matt Difanis team here at Remax Realty Associates.
I'm Miss Turup, but you can call me Missy. I'm also on the Matt Difanis team.
Okay, so the three of us have had the privilege of working together for Missy's been on the team for 4 years to the week, by the way, and Joseph is coming up
anniversary.
on yes,
Thank you.
and Joseph is coming up on 4 years with our team, and we often among the three of us find ourselves talking about stuff that's happening, either industry-wide news, sometimes at the national level, but a lot of our conversations tend to center around what's going on in the local marketplace. And I wish our clients or that consumers would understand this. And so what we wanted to talk about for our first attempt at doing this type of a podcast style conversation is a theme that's going to focus on two stats. One is the increasing age of the average first-time buyer, which in a relatively short period of time has drifted from an average age of about 30 to an average age of about 40. And the other companion statistic is the fact that the gap in net worth between renters and homeowners continues to get bigger and bigger. And the most recent stats indicate that the average homeowner has a net worth that is 43 times greater than the average renter. So those two stats are the fodder for today's conversation. And by way of background, part of why all three of us have important perspective to offer is, besides the fact that we work with clients full time and love making first time buyers into homeowners, but like we're all homeowners, and I'm an old man. If you're looking at this on video, you can tell I have some gray hair, and but we all three of us became homeowners at young ages and are all way better off for it. So Joseph, let's start with you and kind of what your thoughts are and how that relates to your own life experience. Because I think all three of us kind of underscore, there's a reason that network gap is so big and why homeownership is such a big part of it.
Sure. Like I said, we bought a house back in 2017, and I wish we would have done it sooner just because I think it's a fantastic investment. And especially when you look at home prices now versus what they were then, we were able to afford more house. And in the long term, it's essentially been a forced savings account along with the appreciation we've seen in the last couple of years.
Ms. Turat, let's hear about your story, because Joseph talked about kind of watching the market as a sort of casually hunting but not getting off the fence for a somewhat prolonged period of time. Your story was a bit different because at first it wasn't even really on your radar. So let's hear about your story.
And it wasn't until I got into real estate that I was even considering purchasing a home, even though growing up, my mom, she had, she was a homeowner, but that was something that was never like instilled in me. Like she didn't really make it a big deal.
So you moved here, and obviously you had relocated and were renting and obviously you were just starting a new career, but you were coming up on the end of that first year, and you're thinking you got the perfect starter apartment, location, and very nice, but obviously you were going to need more space, and mostly you needed more kitchen and counter space and cooking space and all that stuff. And so here you were in year two, and I had commented to you, we're in the car going someplace work related, and I had commented to you, you could afford to buy a house.
Yep. I was like, what do you mean I could purchase a home?
Yeah, and my response
Yeah.
back was, "What do you mean? What do you mean? You could buy a house." And it just wasn't on your radar. So from there, when the seed was planted, what did you do next?
Basically did what I would, recommend any of my clients do. And I just got in touch with a lender. This one was Sharon Roth at Prime Lending. And I scheduled a meeting with her, and we just, went through like, what do I need to do in terms of like the financing part. Yeah, and then I want to say maybe like 2 months or so, we met back up again, and she was like, "Okay, you're, with this in mind, you can, you now qualify for like conventional." And then she kind of gave me gave me like what I was pre-approved for, and then from that moment forward, I started like, okay, let me look at homes.
Did either of you buy a house that you looked at and said, "This is absolutely perfect. I will stay here forever"?
No.
No.
Right. Okay. And um, did you end up how much did you end up needing for cash to close, if you remember, or roughly? Because a lot of people think, "Oh, I need to save up 20%." What did you end up needing for cash to close roughly?
I feel like it was around 2,500, but I qualified um for grant for I want to say one or two grants,
Yeah, down
which
payment
is
assistance
why
grant.
which is why I was able to have that. Yeah, to
Super low.
cash
So I just
flow.
want to repeat that. It was something at or a little below $3,000 cash to close
Hmm.
on a house that was in fact a multiple of the size of your starter apartment. And Joseph, what was your situation?
Yeah, so I used an FHA loan and we also had a down payment assistance program. So I believe my out-of-pocket costs ended up, counting inspections and everything, was about 2,500 to $3,000.
In both cases, both of you got into these houses not with five figures plus, but with just a few $1,000s cash to close. We already agreed you didn't get a perfect house and you didn't get a forever house. So, having said that, why are you glad that you own a house, Miss Tua? What are your thoughts at the? Because you're now 2.5 years into your homeownership journey.
Hmm.
What are you thankful for when you look back and think, "I'm so glad that I didn't wait"?
I think the amount of space I was able to get for how much I paid for it. Because now, obviously, I show clients home, but I also look at I don't know, the hot sheet to just kind of see what homes are available in the price range of my clients, but also price
And for
range.
people who don't for people who don't know that term, that hot sheet is sort of the on the home screen when we log into the MLS, the last 24 hours of activity, what's new on the market, what went under contract, what closed.
Yeah, so when I look at that, first and on behalf of my clients, but also just to kind of be like, okay, if I were to look at homes today, what would be in my price range? And I'm just like, oh my gosh, it's crazy that in a little over two years that it's just like in terms of how much you can get, how much you can get now versus then when I was looking for a home. Yeah, it's crazy.
In other words, if you had waited, you would have been struggling because you would have had to have increased your price range a bunch to get as much house today.
I don't know. It would have been different. I would have just felt like I was possibly settling. I guess I'm grateful for a garage, um, because having to then just park on like I had a parking space, but it just like it was underneath a tree where I'm like every time when I step out I have to like clean the car. And then I guess I'm also I'm also grateful for the ability to like make my home like any, just in terms of design and paint it any color I want and choose any color tile and stuff like that. And lastly, I'm grateful that it's mine.
So Joseph, what are your key takeaways when you look back and think, why are you glad that you bought when you did?
Yeah, so I'm incredibly grateful that we bought when we did. We had been looking off and on pretty casually for a couple of years leading up into it, and then we found out we were going to have Leo, and that was kind of a catalyst. It's like, all right, we need to make this happen. So we found a place. Like I said, it wasn't a forever home, but for just a little bit more than the studio apartment we were renting, we were able to buy a house, and we have a lot more space compared to a studio apartment. And since we bought it in 2017, I mean, you're paying down someone's mortgage. I think you should pay down your own. That's sort of a forced savings account there. And then the appreciation that we've seen in the last coming up on 9 years gives me a lot more options than I did when we initially bought a house, just because of the value we've gained. Like you were talking about earlier, the difference in net worth from renting versus owning. um, is substantial. Now we have options for what we want to do for the next house. Do we want to find a forever home? Do we want to sell this one and use that as a down payment on the next one? Or do we want to hold on to this and rent it out and use that as income to help purchase the next one? So I wish I would have done it sooner. But the timing ended up working out really well for us, and I'm quite happy to be where we are.
Yeah, and you file that under really good problems to have, which is, okay, so we know it's not our forever home, which means we're going to move somewhere else at some point for more space or whatever. But the first world problem that you now get to enjoy is, do we take this significant amount of equity and use that for a supersized down payment on the next one? Or do we keep the equity in this house, keep it as an investment, and scrape together a new down payment? But now we own multiple houses, and now we're investors and homeowners. So, Joseph lives in the Muhammad area. Missy lives in a central Champaign neighborhood. I have lived in Muhammad for a number of years. I currently occupy one of my own longtime investment properties in an older Champaign neighborhood. Joseph, what would you estimate? You said you put down just a few $1,000s. You've been in your house now for like 8-9 years. Rough numbers, what do you estimate your equity position is in the house at this point?
So like you said, we put down a minimal amount, ended up being about $5,000 using. So we put in around $3,000. There's a down payment assistance program, which means we started out with essentially $5,000 in equity on the property. In that time, in the time since 2017, we've paid down the mortgage about $20,000, but I would estimate that our equity is probably closer to about $100,000.
Yeah. So separate from the mortgage pay down, it's still tens of thousands of dollars just from having gotten your foot in the door and riding that appreciation elevator up since you've purchased it. So in other words, just the home ownership portion of your household's finances, just the home ownership portion now accounts for $100,000 of net worth.
Yep. Which is crazy.
I know, for somebody who came to the closing table with what, $4 grand.
For bills we were going to pay anyway.
It's not that buying a house means that you're going to pay less than you pay for rent, but you were at an inflection point starting a family. You were going to have to upsize one way or another. Your bills were going to get bigger one way or another. Yeah. So Ms. Turat, you've been a homeowner for 2.5 years, so not nearly as long. And you came to the closing table with around $3,000. Mm-hmm. What do you estimate your equity position to be 2.5 years later?
Well, when you first asked that question, I didn't know. But after doing the math, I'm doing
this is so for people assuming we edit this, this is take two because to let people know behind, a little BTS action. So Ms. Turat, what's your hell if I know? No one told me I was going to. So for take two, Ms. Turat.
No, this is take three. Okay.
What do you estimate 2.5 years later? What do you estimate your equity position to be for somebody who came to the closing table with about $3,000?
I think it would be about $50,000.
$50,000 in home equity. Okay. Yes. So that's a big deal.
It is.
So are you going to stay in your house forever?
No. Are you talking to me? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So, because we already talked to Joseph about that. Mm-hmm. So a lot like Joseph said, you're going to have the choice of, do I buy the next one and come up with a new down payment, or do I sell this one and roll the equity in? But either which way, is there any chance you would have saved up $50,000 if you had delayed your home purchase by this 2.5 years? Would you have had $50,000?
No.
Great answer.
I don't think she said just kidding. I don't think you were kidding. No.
I mean, no.
No. Yeah.
Can we curse here? Can we curse?
Yeah. My PG cursing, I think, is okay. I don't think we're going to have a lot of 6-year-olds listening to this. I don't think they're in our target demo. But right. But yeah, because that's really if you're listening to this conversation and you're thinking, I can't afford something that really, really, really thrills me and it's not going to be perfect. But there's no way, like, you're 2.5 years later and $50,000. And the question would be, would you have saved up $50,000 if you'd waited 2.5 years? And there's no way. It's really hard for many of us to keep up with just the rising cost of everything. And one of the biggest advantages of becoming a homeowner is most people in our market anyway, most people become homeowners with fixed rate mortgages. So other than the relatively small portion of your total payment that's attributable to real estate taxes and insurance, and those can change year over year, but usually by very small amounts. But the actual mortgage payment, the principal and interest, that is locked in. That's fixed. That will never go up. And depending on your circumstances, if rates go down, you can refinance, or if you have private mortgage insurance, you can drop private mortgage insurance later with enough equity, and your payment may actually go down. So, what would you two say to somebody who, kind of like Missy 3 years ago, not even on their radar? What would you say to put it on somebody's radar and to say, here's why you don't want to wait? Because Missy quotes me occasionally as commonly saying, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. I'm waiting for the perfect house.
Before we switch topics, so I want to bring up one of the articles that we read. So when you rent, it's not that you're less likely to save, but it's like, it was talking about how like your mindset kind of like shift versus if you say to yourself, oh, I'm going to purchase a home, and then you're consciously thinking, oh, I need to save up for this.
Matt, you and I were talking about this. My mantra recently has been to be an investor, not a consumer, and get returns on your investments instead of buying the latest and greatest stuff. I would rather invest it and have that work for me over the next several years.
In the interest of not overselling, because obviously the roof over our own heads, there is an investment component to it, because obviously we get the equity build up and we're able to leverage borrowed money to buy something that appreciates and is considered way less risky than just buying, picking stocks, for example. But first and foremost, it puts a roof over our heads, right? And yep. The problem with renting the roof that's over your head is you're subject to really tough market pressures. And I'm a landlord, and the rents on my properties have skyrocketed. And it's not because I'm pocketing a bunch of money, but my debt service has gone up. I had to refinance my rentals incident to a divorce. So I had to trade in really low rate mortgages for much, much, much higher rate mortgages, and the cost of insurance and the real estate taxes have gone up.
I know we've all seen that article talking about how Champaign needs to build 7,000 housing units over the next 10 years. Mm-hmm. Within that, there's a survey that they're working on, and the preliminary findings said that 80% of landlords surveyed had increased their prices in the last 12 months. Since 2010, the median rent has gone up more than 50%, which is that's a big change. With the need for 7,000 additional houses, I mean, that just to keep up with demand, supply and demand says homes are going to continue to trend upwards.
I'm really glad you brought that point up, because one of the things that we will hear clients say is, a fairly common scenario is they'll dip their toe in the market, and a little like what you described your own situation as, until you found out you had a kid on the way. It's like, all right, now we have a deadline. We got to do something to make a change. But a lot of people are like, all right, I'll dip my toe in the real estate market. I'll get pre-qualified, and then
look for years.
They decide.
They'll look for years. Some people will look for years.
Exactly. Yeah. I don't find what I want right away. They're not perfect. They all have problems. I'm not real excited. I'm not getting the feels. You know what? I'm just going to push pause, and I'm going to wait for prices to come down, and I'll come back again next year. And what are you both seeing when people do that?
It's not the same price. Like, you're in a completely different price range, probably, by waiting an entire year.
Or longer.
It's not like it's not like homes are, like the prices of homes are going down. Like, they're steadily increasing.
I was casually looking for a while leading up to us actually purchasing, and I thought you're going to need to put 20% down. So I was holding out until I saved up more money, and I didn't have all the details on hand to make an educated decision. What I should have done is I should have reached out to a lender as soon as I even thought about purchasing a house, just to talk about numbers. What do I need going into this? What loan programs are available? What is my purchasing power here? Then I could have actually honed in on the right thing for us, instead of casually looking on Zillow or Realtor.com and seeing what their estimates are. Those are great for a quick reference, but they don't beat going to a professional and talking about real world logistics, both with a lender and with a realtor to know what the housing market's doing.
Yeah, and there's also, I think, a misconception that, well, stuff's about to get real if I go sit with a lender. First of all, we all three of us are very low pressure, and the lenders that we work with are going to be very low pressure as well. So, like, there's no expectation of we're dragging you in there and we're going to tighten the screws on you. It's just, to Joseph's point, as somebody who bought his first house before he was a real estate professional, what does he wish he had done differently? I wish I'd had that lender conversation sooner rather than later, because I labored under a misconception for some period of time that delayed me, because you said you wished you'd done it sooner, even though it all worked out, obviously.
Yep. And I encourage my clients to reach out to a lender, even if we just connected because you were interested in a particular house, but you might not be super serious yet. Even if it's a one day we're going to buy a house kind of thing, talk to the lender now. There's no cost to get pre-approved. They're going to give you a bunch of insight on your financial standing, and even if you're a year out, they can give you some tips on how to best prepare for that, savings goals, if you can do anything to increase your credit, all sorts of great stuff just by having a free conversation.
Yeah, the year out part. So Miss Turot was almost a best case example, because she didn't have anything she had to dig out of or nothing negative. She just had to build. But by starting the conversation with the lender, you got a roadmap, right? And in your case, it was just a few months from, here's the roadmap. Like, you don't qualify today, do this, this, and this, and
and then it's not, obviously it's not, it wasn't magic. It did take a few months. And then, well, not a few months, I'll say like maybe 1 or 2 months.
That's crazy fast. I mean, that's like, again, your best case scenario, because there's nothing negative. It was just do this, this, and this to establish a credit history.
Yeah, but also in terms of like, if you're, this to a buyer, if you're someone where you found out after talking to a lender, man, like, hey, you don't qualify right now. Like, don't see it as it's not right now. Like, don't give up. Don't think, okay, let me wait another 2 years. It just means that you probably have to be a little bit more diligent and seeing what you can do. But, it can still happen. It's just going to take more time. Just don't be discouraged
let me talk about that for just a minute. So a lot of people, like I said, you're a best case scenario because you had nothing negative to dig out of. You just had to do a little bit of building. But we get lots of people who have repair work. Well, if you have really bad credit because you've consistently made bad choices, or have just not been very disciplined, or consistently choose to spend more than you make, you're not probably all of a sudden going to change all of that and get your credit in great shape. That's going to be a real rebuilding journey. But we've certainly seen cases where medical collections, for example, or a brief limited period where an injury caused a job loss and an interruption in income, and they get past all of that and they really can dig out relatively quick. Things like getting a few of those collections paid off. Now, don't do this without talking to the lender, because this part is not intuitive. We have all learned the stuff that makes the biggest difference for mortgage qualification purposes is not what you necessarily think. So do not go this alone. And what I'm describing is not something where you have to pay for any of this, but with the advice of a lender who will tell you, do this, this, and this, because this will get you into that qualifying territory the fastest. Enlist their assistance. But even if you have some digging to do, you may have to tighten your belt. You may have to increase the level of discipline. And all of us have clients that have done that because they got to a point of, I am sick and tired of being in somebody else's rental with somebody else dictating how much my housing payment is. And I'm one rent increase away from having to uproot my family and my stuff and possibly change schools for my kids, all of those things.
Or just being unhappy with their landlord, being like, he's not fixing this, he's not fixing that, and just don't want to just move to a different apartment. It's like, no, I'd rather just be responsible for all of that stuff.
Yeah, we had a client recently who's like, well, if I wanted the landlord to fix my range, I was going to have to agree to a rent increase. And I'm guessing that was probably illegal, but it's like, that's, it's kind of extortion. So I want to go back to something that Joseph said a minute ago, which is, so when we get clients who are like, you know what, I'm going to push pause. I'm getting off this merry-go-round because I'm going to wait for prices to come down. Well, first of all, Historically they don't. But let's talk about why we have a reasonable expectation that they will continue not to come down. So, we all work in the Champaign-Urbana metro area. So Champaign and surrounding communities. Joseph pointed to a recent housing study that was published in the News Gazette. The local paper did a great article about this. And what is people's fear when they say, I'm going to wait for prices to come down? We've seen real estate bubbles before, and it predates both of your real estate careers, but you were alive when it happened. I worked through it when values did tumble a fair bit, less here than in other places. But I think, well, is this the next bubble? Should I just wait for prices to come down? And Joseph, you talk about the housing study indicates why would prices come down if we have an actual surplus of housing, but what's the actual data showing here?
Yeah, it says Champaign needs to build 7,000 housing units in the next 10 years just to keep up with demand. So, I mean, simple supply and demand economics say with high demand and low inventory, prices will continue to trend upwards. And we've been seeing that for the last several years. Our local inventory has been about 1.4 to 1.5 months supply for the last year, I believe. It was a little bit lower a couple years ago. So it's come up a little bit.
Now, hang
but it's
on, just so
still well
people
into
just so people know what that means, because in a vacuum, 1.4 months doesn't mean anything. Balanced, meaning plenty of houses available, would be what? How many months of supply?
4 to 6 months supply.
And we're at what?
1.4.
Okay, which is
we've come up
persistently
a bit from under a month. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So we've had long-standing market conditions and stats that point to a real shortage of housing, and we know we're not going to solve a 7,000 unit deficit anytime soon. And also, what's the other thing? If those have to be built new, what does that mean relative in the affordable housing segment? Are we going to be putting brand new units on the market for 150?
Not at that price point. No, actually, that same study referenced in the News Gazette said housing building costs have increased over 30% in the last couple of years. So even new construction costs are going to be coming out on the higher end.
So if you're a first-time buyer in the ranges that either of you were in, and certainly in the house that I'm standing in, which I've had for years as a former rental property, like there won't be any more of these. Like there's a fixed supply. You cannot make any more of these for anything. I mean, building new in any of the houses that the three of us own would cost a multiple of what we paid for our houses. And so if you're a first time buyer, kind of the takeaway is an even more emphatic, don't wait. It's not going to get any more affordable. And even if we somehow manage to tilt public policy to favor more building, that's not going to suddenly bring prices down in the more affordable segments because you can't build them in that price range. It's a fixed supply and there's always demand. People always need the affordable stuff. So as we wrap up our inaugural podcast conversation, what would be your parting thought if you had somebody who's on the fence and you're just given just real world advice? What would be your one or two or three bullet points of advice to somebody who, should I even be a buyer? Should I not? Okay, I'm a buyer. What should be motivating me?
My recommendation would be to do your homework and talk to professionals just so you know where you're at now. And you can set a timeline. If it's now, if it's in the future, 1 year, 5 years, you can, like you said to Missy, have a roadmap of how to get there with real world information, not just an article you read online. Talk to someone who knows what they're doing, who's in this market, who does business here every day. Connect with a lender, find out your purchasing power, find out if there's anything you can do to maximize your time between now and when you buy. And if those numbers make sense, connect with a realtor to talk about what opportunities there are for you.
And my only gentle little pushback on that would be, and it's okay to talk to the realtor first, because the realtor often is the person that helps connect you with all of those other bits and pieces. So I don't want anyone to think you got to get through the first 8 items on the to-do list and then come see us. Feel free to come see us first, and we'll help get you to those other folks. Ms. Turot, what would be your couple of elevator speech items if you were talking to somebody who said, all right, you sell real estate for a living. I'd sort of been thinking about maybe buying a house. What do you say to somebody?
Okay, so my one advice is I would suggest that you meet with a real estate professional first before talking to a lender. And the reason is I think the real estate professional would have, obviously a list of names and people that they would recommend to help you with like the financing part if, obviously if you're choosing to finance the property. But also I think when you talk to a real estate professional, they'll be able to just kind of walk through the steps. And even if it's just the beginning, because I think when, as, a first time home buyer, or when you're a first time home buyer, just all this information, you're just like, you're nodding your head, you say yes, and you're just like, okay, I get it. But then once you're in it, like once your offer has been accepted, once you're under contract, then it's just like, it's just a whole nother thing and you just kind of get overwhelmed. But I say, first thing first, talk to a real estate professional.
If anyone's ever got a question about what we're talking about here, a house you've seen on the market, you just, whether you're serious about buying a home or just kind of looking casually, don't hesitate to reach out to us. Every one of us here is passionate about our jobs. You're never bugging me. I love talking about this. And if you text or call me, it gives me an excuse to talk about this. So again, you're never bugging any one of us. So reach out to us anytime.
Shameless plug. What's the website?
I,
MattDefanis.com.
I believe it is mattdefanis.com. Once again, that website is mattdefanis.com.
I really think we should have a jingle.
Yeah, we
should
will.
have a
Don't worry. We
jingle.
will. I want to then sort of wrap all of that up and make a final point that will be a teaser for a future conversation we're going to have. When you buy a house, if you're the client, you're the hub in the middle of this wheel, and there's all these spokes that go out to title company, lender, home inspector, appraiser, and all these other members of the cast of characters, but they're out there on the periphery and you're in the middle. Our job when we're working as real estate brokers, our job puts us right in the hub with the client. We are the one person who connects with all of those spokes, all of them. And so to Missy's point in particular, by all means, talk to us first. And the last point I want to make is, if you've been listening to our conversation, I hope you're getting the distinct impression that we're not here to sell you anything. We are, under the license law and under our trade organization's code of ethics, functionally, we act as fiduciaries. Our license law requires that we actually represent the best interests of our clients. Yes, we get paid when we do that, but we have a huge stack of duties that ultimately boil down to our job is to promote and protect the interest of our clients. So my parting thought is, have those conversations with us. We're not here to try to sell you something. We're not here to sell you anything. We are here to understand your situation so that we can do everything we can to protect and promote your best interests and get you started on that journey, if that journey is what makes sense for you. So listen, I feel like for not necessarily knowing what we were doing, I feel like this went really, really well. And I'm going to tell you, both of you, from my standpoint, you have both showcased exactly why I wanted to have the three of us on a conversation like this and why I'm excited to do future ones. This has been truly enjoyable for me, but also just fantastic listening to and learning from both of your perspectives. So thank you